Hello, everyone. Before I tell you my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever agreed to something because everyone around you said it was the right thing to do, only to spend years wishing you had said no? If that has ever happened to you, tell me in the comments. I read every comment because sometimes a stranger's story reminds us we are not carrying our burdens alone. My name is Naomi Miller. I was 21 years old when I became an Amish bride. People smiled at me that morning. They hugged me. They told me I was beginning the happiest chapter of my life. Looking back now, I wish someone had warned me that happiness and silence are not always the same thing. There was one Amish wedding tradition in our district that nobody ever explained to young girls. Not while we were children, not during our teenage years, not even while we were preparing for marriage. You learned about it only after your wedding clothes were already hanging in the bedroom, when there was no turning back. I did what every bride before me had done. I accepted it without asking why. For nearly 8 years, I believed I had done the right thing. Until my younger sister stood outside my front door one rainy afternoon and whispered 7 words that changed my life forever. They're asking me to do it too. Everything inside me stopped, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the week before my wedding. I grew up on a dairy farm in Holmes County, Ohio. Our house sat at the end of a narrow dirt lane surrounded by maple trees and cornfields. Every morning began before sunrise. Mother baked bread while father and my brothers milked the cows. My sisters and I cleaned the house, gathered eggs, washed clothes, and helped prepare meals for everyone working outside. Life followed the same rhythm every day. Simple, predictable, peaceful. At least that was how it looked. My fiancé, Isaac Yoder, lived 4 farms away. He was 24 years old, quiet, hardworking, patient. He never spoke loudly. He never argued. When people described him, they always used the same words. Dependable. Everyone said I was fortunate. I believed them. The Saturday before our wedding, my mother asked me to help fold fresh quilts in the upstairs bedroom. The room was warm from the afternoon sun. Outside, I could hear horses pulling wagons loaded with benches that would be used for the wedding meal. Relatives had already started arriving. The whole farm felt alive. While we folded quilts, Mother suddenly stopped. She walked to the bedroom door, closed it, then turned the key. That had never happened before. She sat beside me on the bed. For several seconds, she simply looked at her hands. Then she reached beneath one of the quilts and removed a small wooden box. It was old, older than I was. The corners were worn smooth. She placed it between us. Naomi. Her voice sounded different. There is something every bride in our family receives. I looked at the box. What is it? You'll understand soon. She lifted the lid. Inside was a folded piece of yellowed paper tied with a faded blue ribbon. Nothing else. No jewelry, no money. Only paper. Mother untied the ribbon carefully. This belonged to your grandmother. She handed it to me. The paper contained only one sentence. If you accept this promise, you must never speak of it outside the family. I frowned. What promise? Mother gently took the paper back. I cannot tell you until tomorrow. Why? Because that is how it has always been done. I wanted to ask another question. Instead, I stayed quiet. That answer had been used for almost everything in our community. Because that is how it has always been done. The next morning, my Aunt Ruth arrived before sunrise. She kissed my forehead. Then she smiled. So, your mother showed you the family promise? I looked surprised. You know about it? She laughed softly. Every married woman in this family knows. What is it? She shook her head. You'll find out soon enough. Then she changed the subject. By lunchtime, I had asked 3 different women. Mother, Aunt Ruth, grandmother. None of them answered. Each one smiled. Each one told me to trust the family. That evening I walked outside alone. Isaac had stopped by with his father to help finish setting tables inside the barn. I found him carrying stacks of wooden chairs. Can we talk? He smiled. Of course. We walked toward the fence where no one else could hear us. I decided to ask him. Did your family tell you about the wedding promise? His smile disappeared. You know about that? Only a little. He looked back toward the barn before answering. My father said it belongs to the women. So you don't know? No. He seemed almost embarrassed. They only told me not to ask. For the first time, I realized the mystery belonged only to the brides, not the husbands, not the fathers, only the women. That made me even more curious. The wedding morning arrived. 300 people filled Father's barn. The ministers preached for hours. We exchanged vows. Everyone smiled. Everyone congratulated us. By late afternoon, the last guests began leaving. I thought the day was finally over. I was wrong. Mother quietly touched my arm. Come with us. Us, not you. Us. She led me into my childhood bedroom. Grandmother was already waiting. So was Aunt Ruth. My older cousin Esther stood beside the window. 4 generations of women. No one smiled. Mother closed the door. Grandmother placed the same old wooden box on the table. Then she looked directly into my eyes. Naomi, today you stop being only our daughter. You become the keeper of something every woman in this family has carried. My heart began beating faster. She slowly unfolded the paper once again. Then she asked the question I had never expected. Do you promise that no matter what happens inside this family, you will protect its reputation before your own comfort? The room became completely silent. I looked from one face to another. Mother, grandmother, Aunt Ruth, Esther. Every woman was waiting. No one explained. No one said why. No one asked if I understood. Only one word stood between me and the rest of my life. Yes. Or no. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had been taught how to become a bride. I had never been taught how to refuse. So, I whispered the same answer every woman before me had whispered. Yes. I had no idea what that single word would eventually cost me. The ride to Isaac's farm should have been the happiest ride of my life. The horse moved slowly along the country road. Children waved as our buggy passed. Neighbors smiled. The evening sun painted the fields in soft gold. Everyone saw a happy Amish bride beginning a new life. Only I carried a promise I did not understand. Isaac held the reins with one hand. He smiled at me. You've been quiet. I'm just tired. It was a long day. I nodded. That was true, but it was not the real reason. The words from my grandmother kept repeating inside my mind. Protect the family's reputation before your own comfort. What did that really mean? When we reached Isaac's farm, his parents welcomed us with warm smiles. His mother hugged me tightly. Welcome home, Naomi. Home. It sounded comforting. I wanted it to feel true. The farmhouse was smaller than my parents' home, but it felt warm. Fresh bread sat on the kitchen table. A kettle steamed gently on the stove. Everything smelled of cinnamon and pine wood. Isaac showed me each room. This will be ours. I smiled. It is beautiful. For the first few days, life felt exactly as I had imagined. We woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast together, worked in the fields, laughed while feeding the chickens. Every evening we sat on the porch watching the sun disappear behind the hills. I remember thinking, maybe the promise was only symbolic. Maybe every family had strange traditions. Maybe I had worried for nothing. Then, exactly 8 days after our wedding, someone knocked on the front door. It was my mother. She rarely visited without sending word first. Her face looked unusually serious. I need to speak with Naomi. Isaac smiled. I'll check the horses. As soon as he stepped outside, Mother reached into the basket she was carrying. She removed another folded paper. This one was newer. No faded ribbon, no old handwriting, just a list. She handed it to me. What is this? Our family record. I looked down. There were names, dates, short notes written beside each name. My grandmother, my great-aunt, mother, Aunt Ruth, cousin Esther, every married woman in our family. I looked at Mother. I don't understand. She pointed toward the page. Every family disagreement. What? Every hardship. Every sacrifice. Every mistake. I stared at her. You wrote these down? She nodded. So did the women before me. But why? So the family remembers. I frowned. Remembers what? She answered quietly. The cost of protecting one another. I turned another page. Some entries were only one sentence. Others filled an entire page. None of them mentioned names outside the family. No blame, no details, only pain hidden behind careful words. One sentence caught my attention. Spring 1987. I remained silent so my children could keep their grandfather. Another read. Autumn 1964. Some truths help no one when spoken too soon. I looked up. Mother, these women carried all this alone? She slowly nodded. Now it is your turn. I felt cold. I don't want to keep a book of secrets. It isn't a book of secrets. What is it then? It is a record of love. I looked back at the pages. It did not feel like love. It felt heavy. Mother stood. Before leaving, she said something I had never forgotten. Not every truth belongs to the public. Then she was gone. That night I could not sleep. The little notebook stayed inside the kitchen drawer. I kept thinking about it. Just before midnight, I walked downstairs, lit one small oil lamp, opened the notebook again. The more I read, the more confused I became. These women had not hidden crimes. They had hidden grief, illnesses, financial struggles, family disagreements, private failures. Everything had been carried quietly so children would not grow up with bitterness. Some stories ended with forgiveness, others ended with loss, but every woman had written the same final sentence. I kept my promise. I closed the notebook. For days I could not stop thinking about it. Was silence always wrong? Or could silence sometimes protect the people we loved? The question followed me everywhere. Several weeks later, I finally asked grandmother. We were shelling peas together on her porch. Did you ever regret the promise? She kept working for a long time before answering. Every promise has a weight. Did yours become too heavy? She smiled sadly. Sometimes. Then why keep it? She looked across the fields. Because I confused silence with loyalty. Her answer surprised me. You mean? I thought protecting the family meant carrying everything alone. She gently placed another handful of peas into the bowl. I know better now. I leaned closer. What do you know now? She looked directly into my eyes. A family becomes stronger when it shares burdens. She tapped the notebook resting beside me. But burdens should be shared with the right people. I frowned. I don't understand. You will. Then she stood. Conversation over. A month later, my younger sister Hannah arrived unexpectedly. She looked exactly as I had looked before my wedding, excited, nervous, hopeful. She hugged me tightly, then she whispered, Naomi, I need to ask you something. I smiled. Anything. She lowered her voice. Mother showed me the wooden box. My heart stopped. She continued, They want me to make the promise. I stared at her. The same fear I had carried only weeks earlier now filled her eyes. She swallowed hard. I don't know what to do. For the first time since my wedding, I realized the promise was no longer only mine. Now, it was my sister's future standing in front of me. And this time, someone was asking me to stay silent. I looked at Hannah for a long time. She was only 20. Her wedding was 3 weeks away. The excitement that should have been shining in her eyes had been replaced by uncertainty. She held the same small wooden box I had carried home after my wedding. Only now, it looked heavier. I thought you would understand, she whispered. I do. What should I do? I wanted to answer immediately. Instead, I asked her something. What do you think the promise means? She looked down at the box. I think it means loving your family. I nodded. So did I. She smiled a little. Then why do you look so worried? Because I had spent months thinking about that promise, reading the notebook, listening to grandmother, trying to understand the difference between protecting people and protecting silence. I invited Hannah inside. We sat at the kitchen table while rain tapped softly against the windows. Isaac was repairing a wagon with his father. We were alone. For the first time, I unlocked the kitchen drawer. I placed the notebook between us. What is this? Our family's record. She carefully opened it, page after page, woman after woman, year after year. She read quietly. Sometimes her eyebrows lifted, sometimes she smiled, sometimes she looked close to tears. Finally, she closed the notebook. I thought this would be full of terrible secrets. So did I. But it isn't. No. She looked at me. It's full of people trying to protect each other. I nodded slowly. Yes. But... She waited. They forgot something important. What? They forgot that protecting someone doesn't always mean carrying everything alone. Hannah remained silent. I continued. When Mother gave me this notebook, I thought the promise meant I should never speak. What does it mean now? It means I should be careful with people's private pain. She frowned. Isn't that the same thing? No, I smiled gently. There is a difference between gossip and asking for help. She looked thoughtful. I never saw it that way. Neither had I. Not until Grandmother spoke to me. The following Sunday, our entire family gathered at my parents' farm. Father wanted everyone together before Hannah's wedding. After supper, the men walked outside to look at a new horse. The women stayed inside cleaning dishes. Mother quietly looked at me. You've spoken to Hannah. It wasn't a question. Yes. What did you tell her? The truth. Mother slowly dried a plate. And what truth is that? That a family should protect one another. She smiled. I'm glad, I continued. But no promise should make someone feel alone. Mother stopped drying the plate. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sat down. I've been waiting many years to hear someone say that. I blinked. You have? She nodded. When my mother gave me the notebook, she looked toward the window. I thought she expected me to carry every burden by myself. And did you? Yes. Were you happy? A tear rolled slowly down her cheek. No. It was the first time in my life I had seen my mother answer a question so honestly. I wish someone had explained the promise differently. So do I. She reached across the table and took my hand. Maybe, she smiled through her tears, your generation will. The next morning, Mother and I visited Grandmother together. She was sitting on the porch shelling beans. The notebook rested beside her chair. Before either of us spoke, she smiled. You finally understand. Mother laughed softly. She does. Grandmother looked at both of us. I wondered how long it would take. I looked surprised. You knew we misunderstood it? Of course. Then why didn't you explain? She sighed deeply. Because my mother never explained it to me. The three of us became very quiet. Generation after generation. No one had changed the words. Everyone simply repeated what they had received. Not because they wanted daughters to suffer. Because no one realized the meaning had slowly become smaller. Grandmother gently opened the notebook. She turned to the very first page. There, written in faded ink by my great-great-grandmother, was a sentence none of us had ever noticed. The promise is not to hide the truth. The promise is to protect one another while seeking the truth together. Mother covered her mouth. I never saw that. Neither had I. For years, every woman in our family had remembered only half the promise. The difficult half, the quiet half. No one had passed down the hopeful half. Grandmother smiled. Sometimes traditions do not become dangerous because they are evil. She closed the notebook. They become dangerous because each generation remembers a little less than the one before. Those words stayed with me. A week later, Hannah came to see me again. She carried the wooden box. But this time, she was smiling. I know my answer. I looked at her. What will you say? She held the box against her heart. I'll make the promise. My heart sank for a second. Then she finished. But I'll remember all of it. She smiled warmly. I'll protect my family's dignity, without carrying every burden alone. I hugged her tighter than I ever had before. For the first time, I believed our family's oldest tradition had finally begun to change, not because we rejected it, but because we finally understood what it had meant all along. Hannah's wedding came on a bright Tuesday in early October. The trees around Father's farm had turned deep shades of orange and gold. The air smelled of fresh bread, wood smoke, and fallen leaves. Everything looked almost exactly as it had on my own wedding day. The same benches, the same horses, the same long tables inside the barn, the same ministers, the same prayers. Only one thing was different: me. This time, I understood something I had not understood years before. Traditions are not meant to trap people. They are meant to remind people who they are. But when a tradition loses its meaning, it slowly becomes a burden instead of a blessing. After the wedding meal, Mother quietly looked toward me. "It is time." I knew exactly what she meant. She, Grandmother, Hannah, Aunt Ruth, and I walked upstairs to Mother's bedroom, the same wooden box, the same faded ribbon. For a moment, I felt as though time had stopped. Mother placed the box on the bed. She smiled at Hannah. "When Naomi stood where you are standing," she looked at me. "I forgot to explain something." I smiled. "So did everyone before you." Mother laughed softly. "We won't make that mistake again." She opened the box. Grandmother unfolded the old paper. Then, instead of reading only one sentence, she read the entire page, every word, for the first time in generations. When she finished, the room was completely quiet. Hannah looked at each of us. "So, the promise isn't about hiding pain?" Mother shook her head. "No. It's about protecting one another with wisdom." Grandmother added, "And knowing when someone needs help instead of silence." A tear rolled down Mother's cheek. I wish someone had explained it to me this way. I reached over and hugged her. "So do I." Then Mother turned toward Hannah. "My daughter, you never have to carry life's hardest days by yourself. If something hurts, speak. If someone is struggling, help. If you need guidance, ask. Our family will never expect silence to be heavier than love." Hannah smiled through her tears. "I promise." This time, the promise sounded completely different, because now it was filled with understanding instead of fear. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Isaac and I sat on our porch watching the stars appear one by one. He smiled. "You look peaceful." "I am." "You've been thinking all day." "I have." "What about?" I looked toward the road leading back to my parents' farm. "I kept thinking about how easily people forget the meaning behind traditions." Isaac nodded. "My grandfather used to say, 'Never protect a rule so much that you forget the reason it exists.'" I smiled. I think he was a wise man. So do I. The years passed quickly after that. Our family grew. Children filled our home with laughter. The notebook stayed inside the wooden box, but something about it changed. Whenever another bride joined our family, we no longer asked for a promise before giving an explanation. We explained everything first. Then we let her choose with understanding instead of pressure. Some cried, some smiled. Every one of them asked questions, and every question was welcomed. Slowly, the fear disappeared. One afternoon, nearly 30 years after my wedding, my granddaughter Emma climbed onto the porch beside me. She was 16, curious about everything. She looked at the old wooden box resting near my chair. "Grandma." "Yes? Can I ask you something?" I smiled. "You already did." She laughed. "I mean, what's inside that box?" I handed it to her. "Open it." She carefully lifted the lid. She unfolded the faded paper. She read every word. Then she looked at me. "Why did you keep this all these years?" I looked across the fields where generations of our family had worked, laughed, cried, and grown together. "Because every family receives traditions." She listened quietly. "But every generation must decide whether it will simply repeat them or truly understand them." Emma nodded slowly. "I think I understand." I smiled. "I hope so." As the evening sun settled behind the hills, I realized something that had taken me a lifetime to learn. The tradition I once wished I had refused was never really the tradition itself. It was the silence surrounding it. The silence had created fear. The silence had created confusion. The The silence had made daughters believe they had to carry life alone. The day we finally replaced silence with honest conversation, the tradition stopped feeling like a burden. It became what it was always meant to be, a reminder that families grow stronger, not when they hide from one another, but when they trust one another enough to speak with kindness, listen with patience, and carry life's hardest moments together. If you've stayed with me until the end, I'd like to ask you one last question. Has there ever been a family tradition that you followed for years, only to discover later that you had misunderstood its true meaning? If so, tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Because sometimes, the greatest gift we can leave the next generation is not a perfect tradition. It is a better understanding of why it exists.